Rightio. Yeah. Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. There's three of us here, so I think there's three of us here. Sometimes this thing misreports too, so. Yep, let's see if a few more people turn up. Otherwise might be a little short, but that's okay. We can have a chat. So long as I'm here, that doesn't really matter. Oh, we got someone else popped on. Good. A few more people coming. Sometimes it takes a minute or two. We might hear a little bit of interference in the background. Good evening. I'm just going to turn the fan on because it's hot. Oh. All right. There we go. We got one, we lost one. Okay, well, welcome to our Wednesday night sessions. We are going to talk a little bit about the data and what are we talking about? Let me just remember. I had a very busy couple of days. Yes. We're going to talk a little bit about the business intelligence environment tonight. I'm going to answer any questions you have about what you think, any issues you're having, particularly with the assignment. I think most of those have been answered. I would urge all of you, or whoever's here, and if you're watching this later, if you go onto the course website and you look at the Yammer feed, there's a very lively discussion at the moment. I'll show you in just a minute. That's why we're waiting for people to come on assignment 1, and believe it or not, people have started asking questions about assignment 2, so I'll just share my screen while we're waiting. I'm on a different computer today, so it's a little bit slower because I left my regular computer in my office for some strange reason. So if we have a look at, let's see if this works. I just wanted to quickly show you. So if you're watching the recording, this might make more sense, but if you go down into this one, yes, I'm doing that right now, bro. So if we go all the way down, you see there's a lot of discussion going on in here. People are sharing their topics. I've been providing feedback. This is great. And this actually saves me, believe it or not, a lot of time. So one thing I will say about Yammer that's a bit painful is that there's a little bit of like sometimes things get lost and I don't always see the comments in the right order on my end, even though I own the space, so to speak. It's very hard to see that. But anyway, I'd urge you all to have a look and have a read. Top questions this week was, there are two different examples, and one of them was about, is there a, the examples that we've got in the annotated bibliography folder. If you have a look, there's two different formats. The one someone rightly pointed out which one's better. The one that's the first one is the best one. It scored the highest. I only showed the other one just to give you an alternative idea that you could use. So some people say that, but that second one doesn't have the same depth, so it didn't do as well. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off screen sharing. Where are you? Mara, are you there?
Yeah, just a quick one. I obviously worked in a bank for some years and thought I would do it on data analysis in banks, which I think, apart from the dishonesty that seems to go through the banking system at the moment, data analysis is crucial or critical to banks as far as I can see, because I was very much involved in that, but we didn't have the access to the data analysis systems they do today when I was there. The data analysis systems they have now are far better because it's real time instead of you having to know what you had in the past, which was not real time. So the dashboard system has been marvellous for executives especially. Would it be possible to do it on that basis, that data analysis for the banking industry or for Australian banks for that matter is the right avenue to take?
Yeah, I think it would be a good one. I'm saying that because I've got a...
I'm not in a bank at the moment, by the way.
That might make it a hell of a lot easier. Yeah, I've got a student who's looking into the whole banking thing at the moment, and it's a really good time to do it. There's a lot of information out there in the news that'll give you some good ideas. But yeah, I think so. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because my boss, Rosemary Stockdale, who's our head of school, actually worked in Europe in the banking industry in the 1970s and 80s, and she was a COBOL programmer.
Well, I was in the 80s, 90s and early 90s until they decided very misguidedly to restructure most of middle management. So that's why.
Yeah, I think they've suffered since then, just quietly.
Yes, they have, yes.
Yeah,
I don't think happening then as well as now, so it's not new.
Yeah, the job shedding thing's controversial. It's interesting though, like what she was saying, it just relates exactly to what you were saying, that they haven't really moved on as fast as a lot of people think they have. And she had done research in there some years ago, and then her friends, because she was, I think Rosemary still, even though she's here in Queensland, was based in Melbourne. She was saying that still in Europe, the systems are the same. So
yes, it was actually my role to go back in 2000 and just before the global financial crisis to try and fix up a system called MIDANS, which was from 1980. 19,000 lines of errors. Yeah, don't laugh. It took me months, 5 months.
It's so funny because we talk so much about how much this field has moved on, and I don't see it. I know what people say, like a criticism that my colleague Sandy Kuldeep, you'll hear him coming in the second half of the course, gets in the face-to-face courses he's teaching, is why do you still have the same models? And it's, well, the majority of industry systems are still based on those models. So what can you say? It's just the way it is.
my dance was way out of date. It was hopeless. And because no one monitored or governed it, what it was supposed to do, they just let the errors, no one audited it, in other words. No one had a look until I did, and I thought, my God, am I supposed to fix this?
That's really interesting. So, yeah, thanks for that. That's an interesting perspective. But yeah, that topic's fine. If you have a look at that, if you get a chance to scroll through quickly, you'll see the broad breadth of topics that are coming through now. It's amazing. There's so many different areas in analytics now. It's really become a massive area. No, that's fine. I'm happy with that.
All right, good.
No worries. Okay. Good. Thanks for that. That was a good question. I will. So another question. So anyway, have a look at it. I just wanted to talk about the formats, tutoring on demand. Someone asked a question about tutoring on demand. I don't know whether anyone here is using it. If you have any troubles with that, let me know, and I'll pass it on to Lamo, who is the student support officer. It's definitely there, but I was a bit concerned. There was a question about it, but just if you are using it, let me know. I'm like, why am I getting that question? Normally I don't, but which means it either wasn't working or it wasn't happening. So we had a lively discussion on Monday about the assessment. I've had stacks and stacks of questions here in the last 24 hours. There was a really good post here. In the second one, Michelle Lucas left a comment. When you get to it, you can see it's been seen by come on, you silly computer. It's just frozen, hasn't it? Oh, it's not going to happen. Won't worry about that. She's left a comment on the website in the second section that I think is quite pertinent to the formatting. So if you have questions about the formatting, have a look at that one, because she talks about should it be structured like this, and I said yes, but, and there's an example structure there that I've just put in, so you can have a look at that as well. Okay. What are the highlights for this week? So the way that these sessions will generally work from here is I'll scoot through the things that were difficult, that I had questions about, focusing on a couple of things that people struggle with. If at any time that you had an issue with any of the excuse me, any of the material from this week's module, you can either raise your hand or type it into the chat box. I can hear a little voice.
He seems a bit young.
Never mind. I think the mute button's there. Let me just. Yeah. Okay. I'm still getting the hang of Collaborate Ultra, so if that happens again, I apologise in advance. I'm still not across this. I think I'm almost there. But anyway, let's continue on. That was one of the Steffi was telling me that we had somebody singing online. One of the children started singing in the background. I've heard police sirens. It's maybe not at the person's place, but anyway. All right, so let's look at some of the big picture issues. Oh yeah, we've recorded a few more of the podcasts. We've actually done more of the overviews. And so thanks to everyone who gave feedback on that. I've posted them in the relevant sections. If you get a chance to listen to those, please do so. As you come up on those week's modules, quite interesting. It was great doing it with Nick because Nick's very sharp and he kept pushing me on some of the issues. And what I kept thinking when I was answering those is they're the kinds of questions I get from people. So it might save you some time. We did cover some very complex topics, and one of them was, what is the holy grail of business intelligence or business analytics? So we use a lot of interchangeable terms. When we say data analysis, though, we're coming at it from a different point of view. What we're saying is, look, most of you are aspiring senior managers, or you are senior managers, and perhaps you're trying to understand where you're going with the data. I've just lost sound, haven't I? Thanks, Travis. All right, that was really good to know. It's interesting. Nick's been really pushing me along in those sessions, and I've enjoyed them immensely. We're doing. He is the sustainability convener, and we're doing. Although I'm stepping in to do the collaborates with him. So we're having interviews about that as well. Yeah, it was tough. That question about lakes was tough, and I had to really think about a way. What he does that's so good is that he has no. I hope Nick's pretty a highly technical person, but he's not an information technology professional. He understands these concepts, but I don't think he's across it. So he was asking those questions genuinely. And it gave me some insights into what people are coming to this course with the first time as well. There were some sections that I think I would like to do more like that. Yeah, I mean, thanks for that, Travis. It's good to know. You'd be surprised how many people in here are green on IT. Like the questions I had on Monday around the different sections of the course made me realize that some parts of this need a little bit more attention. So we'll go through those in the Collaborate, I think. One of the tricks of the trade as well, just so you guys know, is that even I was an IT, sort of like an IT professional for small business for a little while, then became an academic and stepped out and came back after my PhD, and the game had completely changed. So I find it really difficult to keep up with the tools. Yeah. Thanks, Murray. Okay, so I find it really hard to keep up. And sometimes, as you'll see when we get to modules 4 and 5, there's a little bit of wisdom that comes in. So we were talking about sales techniques on one of them as well further on when you get to that one. That one I would recommend everybody listens to because it's there's a little bit of discussion, and Nick's a strategist by training, so he was asking questions about strategy. So I like that. All right. So the holy grail of business environment is integration. So one of the underpinning concepts there is that our goal is to have our data completely integrated across all of our units, across everything that we're doing, and to make it very easy to, hang on, I'm getting some feedback there. Let me just check. Okay. So we're trying to get to integration, but what that actually looks like, so I'm going to zip forward a little bit. You guys, you've read this. This is the basic gist of it. So that's, gather information, store data, and collate everything. But underneath all of that, I'll come back to this ERP slide. It's very slow. I like the old one a bit better with the transitions. I'll come back to this. I wanted to talk about this first because we went backwards and forwards. So underpinning everything is architecture. And architecture breaks down into what they call business units. Those business units break down into activities and processes that we try and standardize. So that's the basic model there. So you've got to keep that in your head. So we're trying to create standard processes that are integrated. Something's telling me that this feels like it's out of order, but we spent at least half an hour on this one. So I'll go back and we'll go backwards and forwards as well. Okay, so let me just check something. I'm having weird feedback noises. Oh, that's fine. Maybe my volume's up too high. Turn it down. Okay, good. So the idea. So I had a few questions about this one. And I'm on. If you can't see the screen or you're listening on your phone, I'm on slide 9, and we're talking about the 4 operating models. So the idea is that this is the holy grail. So I don't really want to go back, but I will. If we go back to the first slide, we say data integration is the holy grail of information systems. That's what you want from them. So what does that actually mean? Well, where on this picture it has high and low where it says integration, and low and high when it says standardization. It's a 4x4 model. And on the high end of unification and on the high end of integration and standardization is the idea of unified. So I'm going to read this to you so that I know I talked about it on the slide, but I want to hammer this home. I have a lot of questions about this on Monday. Customers and suppliers may be local or globally integrated. Now, when they say globally integrated processes, they're not talking about worldwide there. They're talking about that the entire business is completely integrated. So that's what I mean when I say the holy grail. We want everything to work together like a seamless machine. That is what, so if we go back, let's just go back for a moment. ERP systems are sold on, I got a lot of criticism about that model, are sold on Oracle, SAP and that. They're sold on their ability to create that integration. Hey, that's really cool. The comment just came across my screen. That's the first time that's happened. My confession is that I work in the wealth management part of a bank surrounded by analytics and big data and the architecture. Yes, it is. We spent 6...
Shit.
You came through on that one. You might want to turn your mic off. 650 million. That's the most I've ever heard of, Travis. I worked on a project with a company here in Brisbane that's fairly big that runs an entire infrastructure for the state that was 110 and counting. So we've spent 650 million using agile project disciplines, scrums, architects using, okay. Biggest in the country. Wow. How do you respond to that? Let me just grab a drink here. I'll be right back. Drinking. Okay. No, you don't respond to it with drinking. Hang on. So, pricing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
What was,
well, it's just a lecture.
what was the budget? 350. So you're at double now. Almost double. Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. That's incredible. Wow. So in that way, I had a lot of questions about this stuff, and it's actually quite hard to do. So it comes across in this in this module as being very straightforward. Yeah, it would be a tough business case to prosecute. The one that I saw it was Energex, the one that I saw. We did a case study there. When I say we worked with them, and I went and had a look at it. That one was 150. So there was a lot of jobs that got lost over that, but it's amazing to me how, like we had the Queensland Health one here that was 170 odd, 180 odd. It's amazing to me that the promise of the software is not, and you can blame anything you like, but there's a lot of hidden complexity in there. So, oh, okay, more than the building. Yeah. Wow. So this is the goal. This is the goal. This is where we want to get to. I've seen them. So what Travis is saying now, I've seen in the research that I've seen, I've been very privileged and lucky in a way to see both ends of the scale. So I've seen it when it's working like clockwork. And generally it comes down to the complexity of the business model. So what's not in this module, which someone brought up, which I think was a really good question, is what's the underlying business model? So there's a really tough question there, and it's like, well, what do you do, and what is your strategy? What's the goal that you are intending to pursue? So if you look down where it says centrally mandated databases, I see decisions, sorry, I'm in the top corner under unification, IT decisions made centrally, high-level process owners, design standard processes, centralized management, often applying functional processes. It's like saying, I'll give you an analogy. It's like saying, when I get up in the morning, I check my bank balance and there's another $1 million there. So, or I'm driving a Ferrari, or I live in the Bahamas, whatever it might be. So this is a goal to obtain. So there are some insurance agencies and some other financial institutions that have achieved this goal. It's incredibly it's an ideal is what I'm trying to say. So if you look down the bottom, okay, so the example that I've often seen is, say, e-commerce. How many make it through? The last time I checked, which was admittedly, I've been in another research field for a while, and I haven't looked at this for 2 years, so put a footnote in that. I would say around 40, what was the last stats I read? 40 to 50% fail. But, yeah, of the ones that work, sounds about right, yeah. So I've had both sides of the coin in the courses I've taught. And that's what I mean. I've been lucky. I came into this field when this stuff was just starting out. One of the things I noticed when we did my first research project was the problems were about non-integrated processes. So being an operations person at the time, I thought, okay, all we have to do is standardize the processes, no problem. It ain't that easy. It's when you say standardize a process, there's usually a group of people that have negotiated a way to work and a way to do things. So, and this diagram doesn't quite do this, but anyway, look, Even though this is 10 years old, we've just talked about this, so I would encourage you all to read and have a look at this article. It's if you get a chance. This diagram discusses it all, and this is the So it does the underpinning. So there's two underpinning assumptions here which are not really clear in the module I have a few questions about. The first one is, number one, you have to have a standardized functional process that's mapped, in which you know everything is going to work according to plan. And number two, that you must understand how your business model operates. I just want to pause for a second and let you think about that. Because you think, well, we're making money. How can we not know our business model? You would be surprised. You would be surprised at how many large investments, not naming any names, like, but I will, they got sold. WhatsApp, for example. $46 billion it's worth now. Something like that. Now, where's the value? And so some people might say there's no business there, but then I was in a seminar yesterday where one of the people was saying there's WhatsApp for business, and they do some ridiculous amount of transactions per day in Indonesia. So paper value, yeah. So paper value versus actual value. So, and that's one of those things. I guess what I'm trying to say is look at this diagram here with a grain of salt and reflect on what it's saying and think, okay, in a perfect world, I would have standardization and unification across my business processes. That doesn't mean we can't use analytics. That doesn't mean we can go, oh, well, it's all a waste of time. In fact, a lot of the newer tools coming out now are saying you don't need that standardization. We can do it for you through analytics. So we're seeing a move in another direction. So just a few questions I had on that on Monday. People generally, yeah. I don't think any of the four major banks have achieved standard. Yeah, and that's what I mean, Travis. It could just be the nature of life. It could just be the way in which things are playing out in the real world, that we have unintended consequences. Maybe the theory's wrong, but it's a goal. And so this is one of these enduring theories. So this came out in the 70s, and this is a rehash. So you can trace some of these ideas back to the 70s. And so now we're facing, so someone, I think it was Travis, we're going to come back to that agile question. I didn't address that, I just realized. Agile, project discipline, Scrum, sprints. One of my good friends works as a senior data warehouse manager. I don't know what he calls himself now, David Waters, and he has these debates all the time. So we will actually come back to that in the next module, I believe. But that is a constant source of problems, and people don't see the financial side of the discussion. They don't see the tangibility of it. So yeah. So what Nick talked about, I think it was in this one. I can't remember now. I've had a long week already. Somebody's backing me. Can you believe that? Anyway, so I looked at like coming up with that strategy and understanding the value. That's a problem that's beyond my pay grade, to be frank. But anyway, so have a look at these and you can trade them off. And what I like about this diagram is it gives you a picture as to where different organizations may be, and the discipline required to maintain them. So what else did we chat about? So keep your questions coming in. I am doing it. I'm a little bit concerned that if I press a button here, it's going to crash. A lot of innovation. Yes, more innovation. I think a lot of the tech is moving ahead. Gregory says, Gregory McKeon, I work in the, sorry, my eyes are playing up. I work in the petrochemical industry. Big oil are highly standardized and integrated. Having worked closely with these companies is not always a good thing. There you go. That's an interesting perspective. Where you say customer service levels suffer and local presence disappears, Are you referring to automation, the automation of the processes, just out of interest? I'm going to look forward a bit to make sure. Oh, right. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, we'll leave it. Take a look. Here's what I've noticed too. There's a trend in e-commerce, and I'm somewhat on the fringe of that. And I've seen some really good case studies. I'm involved in one at the moment, which isn't working well. But if it does work well, hopefully I'll be able to share it with you guys. And it's got to do with why functional sales processes, right? So it's very simple in comparison to what some of the problems you guys would be dealing with. One of the things that they've learned is that a lot of this automation and standardization, exactly what you've said there, isolates the customer from the experience. And you think, well, how does that happen? Well, a lot of that salesy stuff and a lot of the marketing analytics shows you the patterns, but it doesn't show you what the person is thinking or feeling on the other end of that process. And even if they're in management or they're perhaps not a customer in the traditional sense of the word. So I'll give you an example from where I'm at. Oh, Greg. Have I muted you? Hang on a second. I'm having problems.
Mate, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, mate. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I didn't really mean to cut off your story halfway through, Luke, but just to elaborate on the big oil companies, they tend to shift everything into process and systems, and it's really all about safety and just making sure that you're doing the right thing. So if you're running a refinery or a high-risk operation, then it makes sense to have integrated systems, standardized processes. So they are highly unified. But examples like Shell and ExxonMobil, they're run a lot on they become run on the 80-20 rule. So the bottom 20% of business units tend to just get trimmed off the tail. So, and Australia and New Zealand are good examples where Shell have sold out all of their assets of Australia. ExxonMobil have done something pretty similar. So they start analysing business units and countries to the point where they just become, well, we can take that money and put it upstream, or we can put it into exploration and find new crude sources and mine those, or extract the crude, and that becomes a far more profitable exercise than keeping somewhere like Australia open. So although it all makes sense and decisions are made on a global basis in the best interest of shareholders, ultimately the business sort of suffers in the mature end of the market. And that's just been my experience, but those companies are definitely would exist in that top right-hand quadrant of the operating models.
That's a really good point. That's a very good point, and I think we're seeing that in Australia right now, actually. And yeah, that's kind of sad in a way. And I think what you were saying actually matches with you kind of read my mind a little bit. What I was going to say is that we forget about that in automation, especially in standardizing processes. We forget about that aspect to it. You've touched on an issue to do, I don't know whether you've done sustainability yet, but at what point is profitability considered more important, like shareholder wealth? I know most of us here would probably have some kind of investment, and I'm fairly new to it, but I have superannuation and stuff, and I look at that and I think, at what point does it I don't want to get onto this because it's a different topic, but what kind of, at what point does that become unsustainable in terms of wanting to give dividends and drive profit up? So one of my really good tutors, I think he's now running an alpaca farm, he actually told me of a story of a company. I don't want to say who it is because it's very, very well known in Asia, but they kept driving up profits and following the same kind of standardizing model that you're suggesting. And in the end, they reached market saturation. And your story matches exactly what he said. At the maturity end of the level, they had nowhere else to go. Like they couldn't expand, they couldn't contract. They had unified processes. It was all standardized, but they still wanted more growth. So how can you draw that out? So then you've got to think laterally. Do you go into alternative premium services? Do you go into other things? So yeah, it's a difficult one, that one. It's a difficult one. Would you not say that the crude oil market is a mature industry? Oh, I wish I could give you the answer to that. Yeah, do you go elsewhere? I think I don't. That's a damn good question. So I'm thinking of Africa when you say that, because Africa are adopting solar panels en masse at the moment, and they're taking that as well. But there's still room in that market to grow by billions. So I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Big oil companies. I missed one. Sorry. Banks, in my experience, have characteristics of coordination. However, do not coordinate across divisions in managing client databases, managing service expectations, managing privacy with the greater good. There is no one view of an entire client. That's a great point. That's interesting, Travis, because that goes counter to what they teach in marketing. They tell us that everybody has a profile of their ideal clients. So that's interesting. That means that there's room in the market. So that might be part of the answer to the earlier question. There might be room in the market for alternate services. But big oil companies find themselves as energy companies. Today, Total and Shell are investing in renewables. Yeah, I think it's an expandable market for them. From what I understand, I know someone in the renewable space who's trying to start a business based on storage technology. And I think that's probably where they need to go. No, that's interesting to say. And Murray, getting back to your point, and I know we're wandering off track, but I'm really enjoying this discussion. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. A lot of people don't understand their business model. They don't, and these software models, and especially the analytics that lay on the top layer of them, I can never remember what the E stands for in ETL, that are on the top layer that you use to aggregate your content and display your insights and all that, assume that you know that everything's connected and you are in touch with your business model. I'm still surprised, and I don't know why I'm surprised, but I'm still surprised to this day how businesses don't understand how they work. But when you're making money, you're making money. Or if you're in like I know someone who runs a charity, and they don't look at the same. I worked in aid, right? So when I was the treasurer of an aid organization for a little while, and we wouldn't look at things like where are we going. We would look at the mission and the money that was required to support us for that time. But when we had to go for tax status and that, we had to think about what is the model that we use to operate. So when we try to automate something, it's like, well, how does this actually work? So that gets to the questions of standardization and unification. Those processes weren't unified, but for some reason it worked. There's something in that I don't think's explicated very well in a lot of these ICT theories. Banks need to talk to the oil sector. The oil sector's been around probably a couple of hundred, if not 300 or 400 years now too. Maybe they've had the time, and they've certainly got the money to solve the issues. So they can afford a consulting group that will spend, $250,000 over 2 months, 3 months to solve that, or at least to look into it. So that's an interesting problem there. All right. So this is turning out to be quite good. So you guys are across this, which is great. So take these as like not like the Bible or anything, but take these like as a target to shoot for. But as I think Travis said, look, sometimes in the integration of processes, you lose some of the heart of what you're doing. So you have to understand that these kinds of models are predicated on that. So getting to my point, when you look at packages, and we'll talk about packages in week 4, there's a lot of talk about what they sell, and a lot of them sell integration. A lot of them sell unification, the processes and stuff. So if you don't know, or you haven't modeled what your processes are, or you're being innovative and you're making new processes, this can be tricky. But this is the goal. So this isn't really a theory as such, and controversially. That's for information systems research is actually a consultancy. So a lot of these projects are actually built on, MIT Sloan's a good place to look at some of those case studies actually. A lot of them are built on actual banks and you know, oil companies, just to pick 2 examples that are using this stuff. So that was a very good discussion. I'm glad that was where we spent most of our time on Monday as well, and I suspect tomorrow we'll be spending most of our time on that also. So there's a lot in that, and I felt like maybe next time around, if we do this course again, maybe we might have to find more material. And if I do come across some stuff, I will put it through, because this is just one slide, but it can't be overstated how important that these underlying architectural models are. They're dominant in industry thinking. They're dominant in the way that these systems roll out. Architecture always becomes the first thing that people try to build when they build a system. So, yeah, we got a question. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Luke. Just if you don't mind, just clarifying for me, are you saying that, you know, we look at these 4 operating models, and is it the ultimate goal to strive for unification, or is it okay to run a business model that might be low and low, so you have diversification, as long as you understand what your business model is and build your IT architecture around that?
That's a damn good question. So 3 years ago, I would have said everybody wants unification. I would have said absolutely. That's where we need to go. We want these robust processes. But in the last 3 to 5 years, I'm seeing new business models emerge that don't even have their inventory stored in a warehouse somewhere, for example. So when these models were built, you're talking about warehouse businesses. You're talking about the examples we've had tonight. I would say it's fitness for purpose. So it's all about fit. So I'll just give you a quick example. Down the bottom there where it says, for those of you that can't see it, low and low diversification, few if any shared customers or suppliers. There's a dozen businesses that come to mind off the top of my head where it might be a business-to-business deal. There's no suppliers, and the transactions that you do are second and third order. So I would say now that we're in the era of the cloud, and so, let me give you an example. So we talked about WhatsApp before. There's a company that doesn't necessarily have anything but a database, but their business units might be someone else outside of WhatsApp holding suppliers, and they just use WhatsApp to facilitate a transaction. So it depends on fitness for purpose, and that's how I would answer that question. So 5 years ago, yes, we had one type of organization. We really didn't think much about. We had small, medium, large. Now we have. So I went to a presentation today, and the lady was talking about lifestyle businesses and digital entrepreneurship, and she mentioned that 50% of all new businesses are run by freelancers. So, yeah, anyway, it's fitness for purpose now. I still think these are nice ways to organize your thinking around what you're going to do with your architecture, but it has to match the business purpose. So it has to be, so whatever the core business model is, whatever the strategy is, and whatever the goals are, the system should wrap itself around that and enable that. And that's my opinion. But yeah, it's a changing feast. Let's get a drink of water real quick. Problem for us is the high cost of systems. Yes. And 10 years ago, the promise of the cloud that it would be cheaper, but now cloud systems aren't that cheap, and the cloud space has been invaded by the expensive operators as well. So that's a good point. Yeah, well, there you go. Berkshire, just adding to your point, Kerry. Yeah, so Linux was meant to fix that for us, but it's still a high cost operation, so it's hard to say on when we're going to get to the stage where the cost will become. I mean, Travis was saying earlier, 650 million. I've seen case studies in excess of 100 million, one of 200 million, and to me that's an unfathomable amount of money. I think Griffith does it. We don't make money because we're a public institution, but we turn over way less than that. Berkshire Hathaway. Oh yes, Warren Buffett's company. Yeah, well there you go. Value investing. No, yeah, it's a good example. Richard Branson's another one probably. He just uses his brand, although it doesn't always work. As in the case of Virgin Trains, it didn't really work that well. Or when he tried to take over the postal system in the UK. Yeah, so interesting. So fitness for purpose. Okay, so I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. I saw an interesting story the other day where a guy was talking about teams of 3, quality circles. So the model depends on what you need it for. I would say these days, I think there's more. I think what's shifted it is the internet. So if we didn't have the internet, we would have like when I went through university and learned about information systems, the internet, e-commerce had just started. I think we were the first group of people to study e-commerce. Like e-commerce websites, so that's back in the 90s sometime, and Amazon had just started. What's happened is the internet has disrupted a lot of these things and has kind of pushed these things aside. There are entire million-dollar, if not multi-million-dollar businesses now that operate on the internet. So, and having that cloud architecture there promises us that we can have that disruption and have that diversification on hand. Fitness for purpose. It's all about the fit. It's all about the fit. One thing that, if you just wanted a summary point to take out of this slide, it's what do you do? What's the core business? What are you good at? So Woolworths, there's an interesting story here. Woolworths screwed around with this for a while and tried to get an automated everything else with a group out of QUT, and it didn't go real well for them. They got some process integration, but the fluctuation of the market and the turning over of stock, so the rotation of stock and private label branding and stuff like that, caused a lot of problems for them. Markets are disruptive now, and I think to answer the question in a sentence, I would say, look at the market, look at the model that you're using to access the market. If it's not a market-driven thing, and you're in the business, or you're in the core business of, say, helping people, like the organization I used to work for, with sponsored children and building and like so welfare or whatever. How do you achieve your goals? What are the steps you go through to achieve your goals? And here's something that you probably won't hear from an information systems lecturer. Maybe you don't need a system. Maybe you just need to think about how you do things and add a few little bits and pieces along the way in the way that you do things to make it a little bit smoother. So there's an assumption here, and I think Travis touched on it at the top part of the unification when we're having that discussion. What are you doing and why are you doing it? So you can isolate people by being too automated. You can also annoy people by being too uncoordinated. So or not linked together. we're in new territory here. We're in frontier territory, and I think whatever's happening in society at the moment is just starting to happen. And so in my discipline, I just watched everybody lose their jobs in the information system area, say from about 2008 till now, and all of a sudden it's taken off in popularity again. So it's interesting to see how things change, just on a personal level. You can be ignoring the customer from personal level. Yep, you can. You can. So dragging back analytics to this, so this is one common thing I see, and I mentioned this in a stakeholder meeting once at work. It was like, how do you, so if we wanted to look at how well our teachers perform, and I said to them, you've got one metric, but that metric doesn't actually define performance, and I was laughed out of the room. Lo and behold, now they're saying that they can't match up their metrics because they've got quality coming from one hand and quality coming from student feedback, and they've got quality coming from expert feedback. It's different. Well, of course it is. It's two different systems, so they're not going to give the same output, and if they did, it would be amazing. You can't standardize some things either. So anyway, I like that example of Warren Buffett. That was good. We had a similar conversation about implementing a CRM. The first question that they ask you is, what's your current sales system? A good process or system needs to come first before the system. Absolutely. The system can support a good process. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these things can be done on spreadsheets to begin with. That's where I think a lot of people miss it. They're like, well, if we just had this toolkit, we could achieve this. It won't make your life that much easier unless you know what it is that you do. I know it sounds weird, and it's hard to get your head around, but it's the most, just this week, I was talking to another student in this course about, I think he was talking about how he's had difficulties with universities. He's a consultant, so he's having difficulties with universities. So I won't go into the details. I don't want to embarrass anyone. And I said to him, where the same problem we had is that people want a magic pill. They want to be able to go, I want to look at two different parts of my business and see how they relate. Well, how are you going to do that if your systems don't already have that relationship in place? So what's odd about the story he told is I was in the meeting where they were scoping out this model and saying how wonderful it would be. And it didn't work. And I'm not saying that with a smile on my face at all, because it was a higher ranked university, but it was the way it was presented, that this is going to be wonderful, this is going to be great. And all I could think, and the bunch of us were looking at each other, is how is that your underlying processes? And I think you know what I mean. So if you ever tried to change a grade or, change a course, not change a grade, or you've tried to enroll, or you've had difficulties with support, there you go. If we haven't worked those things out and we haven't got them to a certain level of efficiency, the system's just going to fail, right? Alrighty, so we get almost at the end, but I think we've had a good discussion here. I just wanted to highlight, so there's some stuff in here on knowledge repositories as well, if you're not familiar with those. I had one question about what it was. Basically, it's just like a database where you store incidences, alerts, or lessons learned. So it's like a knowledge management system, if you've heard that phrase before. It's a database, like anything else, and you store certain kinds of information. So in the incident reports one, we had someone who walked into a classroom and part of a roof fell on them, and a possum came running out, and they got injured. That incident will be recorded, and we'll report that to our insurer or whatever happens next. So the best use of this I've seen is a programming team that works from here out of the Philippines. A friend of mine is the boss of that, so he runs the entire operation on a tool called Slack, and they have meetings, and he puts all of his knowledge base inside there. I don't know Slack that well, so I'm sounding like one of those people, but I don't know it very well at all. But he runs his entire communication system through Slack, and they report different things in there. So Yammer's an example of a knowledge repository, really, because I put things in there, people talk, I can go through and analyze it And in the later lecture, I will actually show you the back, when we get more data, the background analytics to the questions I've answered and how frequently they've come up. We've got analytics going on Blackboard to see what people click and where they click. And I've got it turned on this semester, and so this teaching period, and we're going to look at, okay, well, that didn't get a lot of hits, so maybe that's irrelevant. So we look at the way that things are structured and try and figure them out. So having that data there is important. It's pretty cool stuff, yeah. There's it can be really useful when people say, I don't know, I can't see this, and then you can go in and have a look and realize they don't have permissions and stuff. So it's quite good. One of the things I like about the Yammer Group Insights tool is it shows you how many messages that you've liked and how many you've read, and I'm already up to 259. And we're only in week 2. So that's good news for me, because it means people are, there's an engagement level there. So it's quite good. I quite like that. It is. You'll be surprised. You guys are very active, and it's like when I first started doing this, it was like, okay, so how are these people? What are they doing? And then once you see how active people are and what they read, you realize there's a silent majority here, and there's a lot of people that read a lot and do a lot but never ask any questions. And to me, I'd say about 80% of the course enrollments, they may never ask a single question. That tells you something. Anyway, hopefully they're getting the right information. The last section I'll wind up on is text mining. This is just a real quick note on this. This is where we're heading in the future. And if you listen to the module, I talked a little bit about this in Data Lake. So there'll come a time when you'll have a search algorithm that you can construct, or will be constructed for you, and you'll have like a Google type interface in your organization, and you'll be able to search, and it'll mean that the idea of integration will essentially become obsolete. That's the plan. And text mining refers to looking through all of your text in your emails, in say in your systems, like Slack, could be your customer emails, like Infusionsoft, if you've ever used that. It has some text mining features, very limited ones. Microsoft Azure has some there as well. SAP and Oracle, they all have them. It would be a well-paid job. It's an interesting point, because I think there's a lot of fear about automation at the moment. But I put up a link to the Future of Work report. I think Alana or someone asked for it. And in there it's talking about creative problem solving. And this is one of those things that if you can think of something to search for, will become quite useful. And I really think in the future that this is going to become something that we'll all really like. So the idea is basically that you'll have an algorithm that will search all of your corporate information. So think Minority Report. It will know that something's integrated because you've told it it's integrated. It will go out and find that and bring it back for you. So think Google, but on a massive scale. There's already moves in certain companies to make this happen, and I can't remember the name of the local company. It escapes me right now. They're using one. They're trying to get it going now. And with desktop search or phone search, you can have it on your phone, and a customer might ask you a question. You can go blah, 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 and then boom. Apple, if you ever go to the Apple store, they've got one, those handheld devices. They use it. They've got an information retrieval device, so they can actually retrieve your details and send you a receipt while you're paying for something. So I guess that's why they're worth $1 trillion, whatever they're worth. It relies on indexing. So what that means is that you don't actually have to have fairly well-structured information. You just have to have the data there, and it will create the index when it does a search. So it has like what they call a spider, or a bot. We'll say a bot because that's, we've got like 2 minutes left. I'm not sure this is going to cut off, but we can keep talking. And it'll go through all of the data in the corporation, all of the information, and it'll create like a bunch of index cards. I think Peter on Monday said she thinks of it like index cards, and that's the perfect way. If you've ever been to a library, or like 10 years ago and 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you looked up the filing card system, that's what this is about. So it will go through and it will rank things according to relevance. This is an exciting development. Now, you might think, well, this is new. In 1992-93, they did one on the OP system here in Queensland. And then they updated it again, I think it would have been around the year 2000, trying to find correlations between high OP and demographics. And they do it every now and again. And OP is like overall position for the people in New South Wales, or like your ATAR score. And they found out that a lot of their assumptions were wrong about where people came from and the results they got. They didn't correlate to low socioeconomic areas necessarily when they segmented them out, which I thought was interesting. But it works on an index. So all of what we've said about architecture in the future will be hidden in the cloud. These kinds of mining tools will be something that you can access. But we are not there yet. We are not there yet. So there's a lot of things that we still need to learn and do. And I think, so there's an example of how it works. You can look at this one here. I had a couple of quick questions about this one. So where it says up the top there in the square, it says information summarization through facts, relations and clusters and summaries. They are created dynamically. So down the bottom where it says unstructured data and information, that's things that exist in the corporation. So I think the best way to think about it is you type a query, the query, so for example, 60% of all new searches on Google are actually new data. Most people don't know that. It's already been there, but it's new, like a new search, like hats and bananas. So maybe no one searched for that before. So the search and retrieval thing processes it, but then what it does is it stores it later in an index so that you can come back and search, and it gets faster with each search and it optimizes itself over time. So that stuff's pretty cool. But to do that in a software package like Cognos, like we'll talk about next week, or like a CRM, as Greg has said there, it could take weeks. So we're not there yet. That's all I wanted to say. But this is exciting stuff. So we use one of these. We're implementing this at the moment for student search. So if I write a paper, right, and it gets published, they're installing an AI tool now. I can't remember the name of it. It will actually go out and search the web for my name and the publication and match up the digital object identifier and automatically include it in my CV. So, I mean, maybe I need to write some more, but that's this is the kind of thing that will eventually happen. So, it's very interesting stuff. All right, so we got some stuff on CRMs and optimizing sales processes and pipelines and funnels and stuff. Data qualification. So that's a big topic in itself. I'm not sure we don't come back to this. Just give me 1 sec. I'm just checking Insight. I'm sure. Yeah. No, we don't. We come back. We talk about dashboards next week. This is a huge area. So there's a lot of tools that get used extensively in this area. So in the module, I talk a little bit about, what was it, Sandy, this week? Qualifying customers, Facebook pixels, and data like that. Dashboards are very relevant. There's a lot of you use dashboards. I've noticed in a lot of the questions that I've had that dashboards come up quite a bit. So I had a question on this, on how does it work, and so again, there's an underlying logic to here, like average order quantities, the typical stuff like, would you like fries with that? That can all be automated now. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I can see people typing, so keep typing. We've got plenty of time. We had a demo of a CRM package with a tool for when a new customer contact the organization. CRM would automatically search the web, LinkedIn. Wow, that's good. That's a good package. There's one called Active Campaign that you can import the data, and then when you can send them messages to their LinkedIn stuff as well. I think it's called Active Campaign, and very good for high management. Yeah, so Sugar CRM. I've heard of that before actually. There's some really cool features in some CRMs now, so you can tag users based on whether they're customers or not. You can tag. I mean, we've been able to do that for years, but you can now score leads according to the actions that they've taken. Leads in inverted commas, people that have contacted you, or when a customer comes in. One of the more tricky things I've seen is that you can actually use scrape web data and stuff so for example, in your LinkedIn example, you can put data pixels from Google Tags on a website, and you can share that data with Facebook and, like you said, LinkedIn, and you can actually pull up everything you know and target just that person again through advertising, which costs you about $1. So there's some pretty cool stuff going on in the world of advertising. Some pretty creepy stuff too. So yeah, it's an interesting world, this one. One of the case studies I've seen recently, they talked a little bit about how some of the data that gets shared is dodgy. So I saw someone who did a YouTube video on something very innocuous, but then took that data, sent that data to Google Analytics. On the analytics page they sent people to, there was a little Facebook data tool. From that, they were able to glean demographic information and data and build a CRM on the fly just from one video. From that CRM, they were able to then send them other content and then segment them based on their activities and actions, on how engaged they were, on how interested they were. One I saw a charity do, which was really interesting, is they were running Facebook posts and then taking people to a certain page and then building profiles of audiences, and this cost all of $10. So just to start the process, that's very interesting. But we'll come back to that. We'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about dashboards. I would urge you, if you want to know a little bit more about this kind of stuff, there's so much out there. So much out there. The Sugar CRM is a really good example. Infusionsoft is another one. That's email-based. There's stacks and stacks and stacks, but we'll leave it there because I'm over time. Thanks for a really good session for the people that came. I'll see you guys again next week. Might be a little bit more crowded because we've got no Collaborate on Monday, so just keep that in mind. And have a good week, everyone. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks, Travis. Good night, everybody.